The story you are about to hear begins in a place where almost nobody expected danger anymore. It is the evening of April 17, 1945. Western Germany is falling apart. The Third Reich is only weeks away from collapse. Across the countryside, thousands of American soldiers under the command of General George S. Patton believe the hardest fighting is almost over. Villages surrender without a shot. White flags hang from windows.
If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.
Farmers return to their fields. But in one quiet farming district near the town of Bayreuth, something does not feel right. Men dressed as ordinary farmers keep appearing where no work is being done. They seem to know exactly when American patrols pass. They disappear before anyone can question them. Then, an American reconnaissance team vanishes without leaving a single radio message. That is the moment experienced soldiers stop seeing peaceful fields. They begin seeing perfect hiding places. The story is inspired by the confusion and deception that marked the final weeks of the war, when Nazi officials, security personnel, and scattered military units often discarded uniforms and tried to move unnoticed among civilians. In those chaotic days, American troops learned that appearances could be dangerously misleading. The sun is already low when a small reconnaissance patrol from the 4th Armored Division rolls along a narrow country road. Their M8 Greyhound armored car moves slowly, followed by 2 jeeps carrying infantry scouts. Dust rises behind every tire. The engines are the loudest sound in the valley. Wheat fields stretch toward dark woods. Small stone houses sit quietly beside the road. Chickens wander freely through empty farmyards. Everything looks peaceful, almost too peaceful. Staff Sergeant Frank Dawson has spent months fighting across France, Luxembourg, and Germany. He has learned that silence often means someone is watching. He studies every window, every barn, every hill. Nothing moves except a farmer guiding 2 horses through a field. The old man barely looks toward the Americans. He simply continues walking behind his plow. It looks completely normal. Then, Dawson notices something that refuses to leave his mind. The man's boots are almost new. His clothes are dirty like a farmer's, but his boots look recently issued. They are military style, heavy leather, strong stitching, strange footwear for someone working muddy fields every day. The patrol continues another few hundred yards before Dawson quietly tells the lieutenant what he saw. The officer turns for one last look, but the farmer is already gone. Gone far too quickly. No horse can disappear that fast across an open field. The lieutenant says nothing. He simply orders the convoy to keep moving. The road enters a small forest where tall pine trees block the evening light. Shadows cover everything. Visibility drops to only a few dozen meters. Every rifle is now held a little tighter. The radio crackles. Another patrol farther north reports seeing several civilians riding bicycles between villages at unusual speed. They never stop to speak with anyone. They simply appear, look toward American positions, and leave. Nobody knows whether they are frightened civilians or something else. The patrol keeps driving. 10 minutes later, they reach a crossroads beside a weathered stone church. 4 local men stand near a wooden wagon loaded with sacks of potatoes. They smile politely as the Americans pass. One even raises his hand in greeting. Lieutenant Robert Collins returns the wave. Dawson does not. He notices every one of the men has shaved recently. Their hands are rough enough to suggest work, yet one carries himself with perfectly straight posture, almost like a trained soldier standing at attention without realizing it. The convoy moves on. No shots, no explosions, no enemy, yet the feeling grows heavier with every mile. About half an hour later, they stop beside a farmhouse to check their maps. The wind carries the smell of wet earth and burning wood from distant chimneys. Somewhere a dog barks. Private Eddie Morales steps away from the jeep to fill his canteen from a hand pump. That is when he notices fresh tire tracks leading behind the barn. Not wagon wheels, motorcycle tires. The lieutenant orders 2 scouts to investigate. The barn doors stand open. Inside are hay bales stacked nearly to the roof. Nothing unusual, until Dawson climbs onto one of the stacks. Behind it lies an empty military fuel can marked with German lettering. Next to it rests a field telephone wire disappearing through a crack in the wall. Nobody speaks. The wire runs underground. The patrol follows it outside. It leads across the field toward a line of bushes almost 200 yards away. When they reach the bushes, they discover something carefully hidden beneath branches. A concealed observation position. Fresh footprints cover the damp soil. Empty food tins, cigarette butts, binocular lens covers. Someone has been watching this road for days, maybe weeks. The lieutenant immediately radios headquarters. Within minutes, orders come back. Do not remain in the area. Unknown hostile personnel are believed to be operating behind advancing American lines. Return immediately. Nobody argues. The convoy turns around. Darkness is arriving faster than expected. The first few miles pass quietly. Then Dawson looks into the side mirror. Far behind them, a bicycle appears. The rider stays almost exactly the same distance away. Never closer, never farther. Just watching. The lieutenant orders more speed. The bicycle speeds up too. After another minute, it suddenly leaves the road and disappears between trees. Nobody laughs anymore. Nobody says the rider was probably harmless. Everyone understands the same thought has entered every mind. Someone knows exactly where they are going. As night settles over the countryside, the convoy reaches another village where engineers are repairing a damaged bridge. Trucks, bulldozers, and Sherman tanks crowd the road. Soldiers wave them through while military police direct traffic with flashlights covered by blue filters. The lieutenant immediately reports what they found. Intelligence officers listen carefully. Observation post. Hidden communications wire. Suspicious civilians. Possible enemy surveillance. The officers exchange worried looks. This is not the first report. Throughout the day, similar sightings have come from several nearby towns. Men dressed as farm workers. Women carrying messages. Motorcycles moving only after American columns pass. No confirmed identities, no captured prisoners, just shadows. Within an hour, headquarters changes the mission. The reconnaissance patrol will not return to its original route. Instead, they will escort an intelligence officer carrying newly captured documents to another command post several miles away. The documents may contain information about remaining Nazi security networks still operating behind the front. Departure is set for 9:40 p.m. The convoy leaves under a moon hidden behind thick clouds. Headlights remain off. Drivers follow faint white tape painted on the rear vehicles. Every turn is slow. Every sound seems louder in the darkness. Rain begins falling lightly. Roads become slick. Branches scrape against helmets as the convoy passes through another forest. Then the lead greyhound suddenly stops. Its commander raises one hand. Silence. Far ahead, barely visible in the rain, stands another farmer beside the road. He holds a lantern. Nothing unusual, except it is nearly 10 o'clock at night. No horses, no wagon, no livestock, just one man holding a lantern without moving. The lieutenant studies him through binoculars. The man never waves, never speaks, never even turns away from the approaching vehicles. Then, without warning, he lowers the lantern once, raises it again, and lowers it a second time. A simple movement, almost meaningless. Unless it is a signal. The lieutenant's face changes instantly. He orders every engine off. The forest becomes completely silent. 5 long seconds pass. Then, somewhere deep in the darkness ahead, another lantern answers with the exact same pattern. The second lantern disappears as quickly as it appeared. For a brief moment, the forest falls completely silent again. Even the rain seems softer. No one inside the American convoy speaks. Every soldier understands they have just witnessed something that was never meant for Allied eyes. Lieutenant Robert Collins does not hesitate. He orders the vehicles off the road and into the cover of the trees. Engines remain off. Rifles are checked one last time. The intelligence officer carrying the captured documents pulls them closer to his chest. Whatever network is operating here already knows someone is moving through this valley tonight. Staff Sergeant Frank Dawson crawls forward with 2 scouts. The wet ground soaks through their uniforms as they move toward the road. The man with the lantern is gone. Only a few fresh footprints remain in the mud. They are deep and evenly spaced. The stride is too steady for an old farmer walking home after dark. Dawson follows them across a narrow ditch. Less than 50 yards away, the prints suddenly join several others. There are at least 6 men moving together. The lieutenant quietly reports the discovery by radio. Headquarters responds almost immediately. Similar coded lantern signals have been reported in nearby districts during the past 48 hours. American intelligence believes scattered Nazi security personnel are guiding hidden groups through the countryside, helping important officials escape advancing Allied forces. Patrols are warned not to trust appearances. Anyone wearing civilian clothing must still be treated with caution until properly identified. The convoy starts moving again, this time using a different road marked on military maps as a secondary supply route. The change adds several miles to the journey, but nobody complains. Every soldier now feels as though unseen eyes are following every turn. The rain grows heavier. Water drips from pine branches onto steel helmets. Tires slip through thick mud. Somewhere behind them, a dog begins barking, followed by another farther away. The sounds seem to travel from village to village, almost like a chain of warnings. Just after 10:30, the lead greyhound rounds a bend and suddenly stops again. A large tree has fallen across the road. It blocks the entire route. At first, it looks like storm damage. Then Dawson notices something impossible to ignore. The fresh cut on the trunk is smooth. It was made by an axe only a short time ago. Nature did not place this tree here. Before anyone can react, a burst of rifle fire cracks through the darkness. Bullets strike the muddy road and smash into the trees around the convoy. American soldiers dive for cover. The Greyhound's machine gun immediately answers, sending bright tracer rounds into the forest. The flashes reveal brief shapes running between the trees. They are not wearing German field gray uniforms. They are dressed in work clothes, heavy coats, and flat caps like local farmers. The exchange lasts less than 2 minutes. Then the attackers disappear into the darkness as quickly as they came. Collins refuses to chase them blindly through unfamiliar woods. That is exactly what the hidden force wants. Instead, engineers use chains and another armored vehicle to drag the tree aside while infantry establish a defensive perimeter. When the road is finally clear, the patrol discovers something lying near the ditch. One of the attackers has dropped a satchel while retreating. Inside are civilian identity papers, several coded notes, a German Walther pistol, extra ammunition, and an official Gestapo identification booklet wrapped carefully in cloth to protect it from the rain. The disguise is no longer a theory. It is now proven. Men posing as harmless civilians have been operating in the area while carrying out military missions. The intelligence officer immediately seals the recovered documents inside another waterproof bag. The convoy cannot afford to lose them now. They may reveal far more than a single ambush. The journey continues through the night. Every farmhouse becomes suspicious. Every light in a distant window feels like a possible observation post. You can almost feel the cold wind pushing through the open countryside while exhausted soldiers scan every shadow, knowing that one mistake could cost the entire patrol. Near midnight, they reach a small crossroads where military police have established a temporary checkpoint. The officers there report stopping two men earlier in the evening who claim to be displaced farm workers. During questioning, one mistakenly referred to an American half-track using its German military designation. The error immediately exposed his training. A search uncovered concealed radio crystals sewn into his jacket lining. The prisoners are already on their way to an intelligence center for interrogation. That report changes everything. Collins realizes the enemy network is larger than anyone expected. These are not isolated fugitives wandering the countryside. They are organized, disciplined, and communicating with one another. The convoy finally reaches the command post shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning. Hidden inside a former school building, intelligence officers work under dim lights surrounded by captured maps and radio equipment. As the patrol reports every detail from the night's journey, specialists compare their information with reports arriving from other American units. The pattern becomes unmistakable. Similar incidents have occurred across several nearby districts. Men disguised as farmers have watched roads, counted vehicles, relayed troop movements, and guided escaping officials through gaps in Allied lines. The recovered satchel provides another breakthrough. One coded notebook contains references to safe houses, supply caches, and meeting points located inside ordinary barns and abandoned mills. Before sunrise, American military police, counterintelligence corps agents, and infantry detachments begin moving toward every marked location. The raids continue throughout the following day. Several suspects surrender without resistance. Others attempt to flee through fields before being captured. Hidden radios are found beneath haystacks. Military uniforms are discovered buried inside grain storage pits. False civilian documents are recovered from farmhouse walls with secret compartments. The investigation confirms that some Nazi personnel had tried to blend into the civilian population during the chaotic final weeks of the war, hoping to evade capture or continue passing information for as long as possible. For the men of the reconnaissance patrol, however, the lesson has already been learned. Their greatest enemy that night had not been artillery or tanks, it had been uncertainty. They had driven through villages where every smile seemed genuine, yet some faces concealed dangerous intentions. They had crossed peaceful farmland that served as a battlefield without visible front lines. General George S. Patton had often reminded his troops that speed was one of their greatest weapons. But speed without awareness could become a deadly weakness. In those final weeks of the European campaign, American soldiers were forced to balance rapid advances with constant caution. The collapse of organized German resistance did not mean every threat had disappeared. In many places, the battlefield simply changed its appearance. Within weeks, Germany surrendered unconditionally on May 8, 1945. Across Europe, millions celebrated the end of the war. Yet long after the guns fell silent, Allied investigators continued searching for officials who had attempted to disappear among ordinary civilians during the final collapse of the Third Reich. Many were eventually identified through captured records, witness testimony, and careful intelligence work rather than dramatic gunfights. For Frank Dawson and the men who shared that rainy night, one memory never faded. It was not the brief exchange of gunfire or the blocked road. It was the quiet farmer, holding a lantern in the darkness. One simple signal had revealed an invisible battlefield stretching across peaceful fields and sleeping villages. It reminded every soldier that victory was never measured only by the ground captured on a map. Sometimes it depended on recognizing danger when it looked completely ordinary. History often remembers the final weeks of the war as a time when Germany was collapsing from every direction. That is true. But those final days also produced some of the most confusing and dangerous missions Allied troops ever faced. Uniforms disappeared. Identities changed. Friends and enemies became difficult to separate. Patton's men survived not because they trusted what they saw, but because they questioned it. Their discipline, patience, and attention to the smallest details allowed them to uncover a hidden network before it could strike again. And that is perhaps the greatest lesson from those tense hours in the German countryside. On a battlefield where the enemy no longer looked like a soldier, the sharpest weapon was not a rifle or a tank. It was the ability to notice one small detail that everyone else ignored.